Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Now, friends, I want to take us down the path of your home life, your personal life, everything that's kind of behind the scenes and maybe not necessarily related to your work, but let's face it, it does bleed over. I hate to admit it, but half of relationships and marriages in the U.S. currently end in divorce. And if this is one of you, then you are probably trying to navigate how in the world to have a blended family or, step families, step siblings, and all the things that happen if you fall in love again. So let's tackle that as our topic today to simplify. My special guest is Ron Deal, and he's one of the most widely read and viewed experts on blended families in the world. He's the founder of Smart Step Families, the director of Family Life Blended, and also the author of his latest best-selling book, Building Love Together in Blended Families, The 5 Love Languages and Becoming Step Family Smart, with the little guy you might actually recognize and remember, Dr. Gary Chapman. Ron is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's a public speaker and the host of the podcast Family Life Blended with Ron Deal. He and his wife, Nan, have 3 sons, and they live in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Ron Deal. Hey, Ron.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Mary.
I'm so pleased that you're here. And, there are topics that I have to simplify with our special guests that, let's just face it, are not easy topics, right?
Yeah.
And I certainly imagine that this is one of those really tricky and complicated subjects out there in the world. Why is that?
I've often said, it's funny you say that, I've often said the middle name of a stepfamily is complex. If there was a web address, it would be step@complex.com or something. It is incredibly complex, and there are so many different layers to the relationships. There's a past that's impacting the present.
Yeah.
There's fear about what the future will be because there's been loss and pain and heartache in the past. That's true for children. That's true for adults. And then you have different levels of motivation to make the family work. Adults tend to be highly motivated. Kids can be anywhere from highly motivated to middle to no, I don't think so. And all of that, shoved into somebody's living room can get challenging. Mm-hmm. And it really makes a huge difference, as you were talking during the open.
Yeah.
This is where we live. This is what we think about. This is what really matters to us. And so when you try to switch gears and go on the job, if things are stressful in your personal relationships, all of a sudden that impacts your efficiency, your focus, and on it goes.
Your energy levels, your right. Motivation to do the work at hand. So that's why I find it so incredibly important to talk about personal topics that may not have a direct link to work, but in fact, it really does. Now, you have this analogy in the book about step families, blended families, they're one and the same, being like cool water. What does that mean? Give us that analogy.
Yeah, so I think step families, blended families, depending on the term you use, and by the way, where you are in the world makes a difference in what terms people use. Yeah. In the UK and South Africa and Australia, step family is a predominant term. In the US, blended family is a little more the predominant term now, but they're often used interchangeably.
Yep.
I often say blended families swim in a different ocean than first families do. First families, the ocean is very familiar to everybody. The water temperature is perfect, meaning as soon as you walk in, you feel comfortable, you feel safe. These are trusted relationships. You're my mom, you're my dad, you're my brother, my sister. Now, you drive me crazy as my sister sometimes, but I still love you, right?
Yeah.
It's almost inherent in the DNA. In a step family, the water temperature is a little cooler. As soon as you step in, you feel that, I don't know if I belong here feeling. And it takes a while to warm up to the temperature of the water. There are some relationships that are stable and secure and safe. That is, biological parents, for example, with their children. That's a DNA deep relationship. But as a step parent, you're stepping into cold water trying to figure out how to belong there. There's different sharks in this ocean, meaning things that cause conflict and difficulty. And you're trying to find other people who are swimming at a different rate and pace than you are. It's back to those complex layers of the relationships. So you're still swimming, you're still family, it's still an ocean, but the climate is different from the beginning. And you have to navigate that well in order to find the smooth sailing waters that you're really looking for.
Which is so interesting to me. I mean, my parents have been married, gosh, I don't even know, 54 years now. And my husband's parents got divorced when he was very, very little. So this is all such new territory for me that if you've not been part of a family that's been divorced, you just don't know what you don't know with this. And so when I was reading through your book, which is brilliant, by the way, I started to understand, or just at least peel the curtain back a little bit further to understand that there are inner and outer people in this relationship. Tell me what that means too.
Yeah, we call them insiders and outsiders.
Yeah.
Insiders are those people who have biological connection with one another. So let's just say in a stereotypical situation, you have a biological mother who has 3 kids.
Yeah.
They are insiders with one another, not just in the sense that they're parent and child DNA, same last name, but also insiders in the sense that they come from the same story, that their narrative is the same. The narrative of we were a family, then dad died, or there was a divorce, something happened. Now we've been in the foxhole of tragedy and difficulty and hard, and we've survived that together, and we are moving into the next season of life, and now an outsider comes into the picture. An outsider, step-parent, may also be an insider if they have their own biological children. So think about that for a minute.
Right.
If you're the step-parent, you're both an insider with your kids, but you're an outsider to your stepchildren.
Right.
And the stepchildren are like, okay, you love my mom. That's great. You're kind of nice to me. That's good. I like you, but I don't love you. And you're certainly not my dad. I like you like a teacher at school that I admire. I like you like my coach on the soccer field that tells me how to play, and I appreciate that. But I don't love you like my father.
Right.
That's reserved for one person in the world, even if he's deceased. There's only one dad.
Yeah.
And so I've got to figure out how to put you in my heart, where to put you, how much do I trust you. That's insider and outsider, trying to navigate and figure out life. You're not born with insider status as a step-parent. You have to grow it. And that is really important, Mary, because at the end of the day, one of the biggest mistakes step-parents make is assuming too much about their relationship with their stepchildren. Like, hey, I'm paying for everything. Hey, I'm an adult here. Hey, I've got kids of my own. I know what it is to be a dad. You need to respect me like a dad.
Right.
That can get dangerous really fast.
Well, I can only imagine. I mean, and as I was reading it, my mind expanded to what that looks like. And I imagine also that the reason people break up, the reason they get divorced, they go, oh, this is too hard. Oh, there's going to be a better life after this if I just let this relationship, this marriage, this whatever go. Yeah. But what the shocking reality is that it sounds like it's so much harder, you know, to a completely different ball game to navigate in that second relationship that I think a lot of people just aren't aware of.
Yeah, this is where expectations meet reality. You know, so when we were dating, the kids seemed to embrace me. Everything seemed fine. Well, really, the truth was you were dating, and it's not the same as being married. We all know that. Even kids know that. And so you were kind of nice, and they were kind of nice, and they were, it was fine with them that mom was dating you, but now something changes at the wedding. Now you moved into the house. Now you're telling me to pick up my socks and empty the dishwasher, and wow, you never did that before. Now there are assumptions about how we're going to move forward with life. This is new territory. We have to actually navigate this together and figure out how we're going to be family with one another. There's a key triangle that repeats itself over and over. So let me just explain. The key triangle in blended families is step-parent, biological parent, and child. Okay? I know there can be more than one child. We'll come back to that in a second. But just think about with each child there's a triangle. And often what leads to the conflict in the marriage and the breakup of marriage, there is a reason the divorce rate in blended families is higher than it is in first families. It's because of this complexity. Imagine stepdad's trying really hard in our scenario, and he's doing everything right, and he has his stepchild's like, hey, I like you, but I don't love you. Get out of my face, right? Back off when it comes to telling me to pick up my room, clean up things. And so you're not my dad. You can't set those boundaries. So the stepdad goes to his wife and says, man, I'm trying. I don't know what to do. I think your kid, there's something wrong with your kid. That's what's implied. And Mama Bear goes, whoa, 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 whoa. There's nothing wrong with my child. And did you just criticize my parenting for the last 15 years? Because it sounded like you were not only knocking my kid, but you were cutting me because you're telling me I didn't raise a good child. See how that cuts both ways?
And
Her
it's
wife
like,
heart.
woof, it just starts to spiral out of control.
Exactly. So her wife heart is connected to her mom heart.
Yeah.
And the mom heart just felt criticism. And so she goes into defensive mode about her child and herself.
Right.
And then her husband says, so you love your child more than you love me? So you see how that triangle starts out with a parenting situation, step-parent, stepchild, but very quickly is all about the marriage also. The way I like to say it is at the intersection of Parenting Street and Marriage Avenue, there's a lot of collisions.
Yeah.
A lot of people get T-boned right there, and it takes them out. So now the marriage is under stress, and it feels like it's all centered around this child. Now magnify that by 3 children who have 3 different reactions to the stepdad, who one child is welcoming, one child's like, yeah, sorta, and another child's like, get out of my face.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that confusing? So you add layer upon layer upon layer, and it all, at the end of the day, it ends up in the couple's relationship. Their marriage is what feels the stress of all those ripples. And by the way, we haven't even added, just a quick illustration, the other household. So there's a biological dad, let's say. There was a divorce that led up to this blended family, and a bio dad in the other home. And he calls every now and then, and he's kind of, got a little bit of an attitude. And so his former wife, the mom, tries to take care of that. She talks to him about drop off and pick up this weekend. But she makes some accommodations because she's learned it's just easier. That's not a hill to die on. But as soon as she makes an accommodation, then her husband comes in, the stepdad, and says, wow, so he gets to tell us what to do with our time and energy. So now there's another triangle, stepdad, mom, and former husband. And the stress that starts in between the homes now quickly ripples back into the marriage. So it's not just about step parenting. It's also about former spouses. It's also about a former mother-in-law who wants to see the kids at Christmas or at birthdays. But how do we make room for her when we have 3 other sets of grandparents or 5 other sets of grandparents, depending upon the situation?
With their hopes and expectations and their non-solicited advice and, all the things, right?
So, Mary, this is where we need to pause and just say, because somebody's watching right now and they're going, oh my gosh, that's my life. That's it.
Yeah.
They're putting words on all those things that are going on. And now I understand why I feel stressed, why I feel lonely, why I feel like uncertain and worried about my kids and anxious for them and their relationship with their step-parent in our home. What do we do about it? Is it hopeless? No, that's the whole point is, yes, we can put words on this stuff. Yes, we know what's going on below the surface, under the surface of the water in the cooler temperature of the ocean where the sharks live. We know what this is. And the more you understand this, the more you as a couple talk, read, discuss, and say, okay, we're not going to let this dynamic get the best of us. Then you navigate together. And again, notice the title of our book, Building Love Together in Blended Families. It's that co-creation of how we're going to do life together. And instead of it dividing us and conquering us, we're coming together to face it and deal with it together. That is huge. That turns the corner. It doesn't mean everybody automatically loves everybody, but it does mean you're on a path toward building that love. That is the reason you got married in the first place.
And that's it. So Ron's not saying to us, okay, we all should just be celibate and never get married ever again, and love is out the window and you're doomed forever. But there is some hope at the end of this tunnel, because I can imagine just even the last 10 minutes of describing what this is, it just sounds like a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of hard times as well. But this is where I think your book is really fascinating, is that now you've taken this scenario, which sounds very complex, and dovetail Dr. Gary Chapman's 5 love languages on top of it. So you might have heard the episode where I interviewed Dr. Chapman. That's episode 40. I'll put the link in the show notes if you've not heard that, Simplifying the 5 love languages. But can you give us a brief overview of the 5 love languages and how to apply that on top of a blended family?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Gary and I have become great friends through the years, which led to the discussions of we should write a book together. I've written 7 other books around step-family living. And this was that merger of my what we call smart step-family material and his 5 love languages. So yeah, Gary's 5 love language principles essentially comes down to this. You need to die to yourself. You need to stop defining love and the way you want to love somebody according to how you think they should receive your love. That is fundamentally what the 5 love languages helps us to do, is set aside me and figure out how to love you in a way that's most meaningful. We all have if you think of a target on us, that doesn't sound good, but in a good way, what's the bullseye to love somebody in a way that actually communicates care and concern for them in a way that they receive it?
Yeah.
And that's what Gary has figured out, is that there are different ways to language love, to communicate love, and everybody tends to have a bullseye, 1 or 2 really big ones, languages that really speak to them. And that's essentially what the concept is. And then he helps flesh that out. How do you live that? So the different languages are words of affirmation. So that can be compliments, that can be kind words, things that you're saying that affirms the person's worth and their value to you. Gifts, giving gifts. And Gary is quick to say it doesn't have to be an expensive gift. It doesn't even have to cost money. He says with kids, you can pick up a rock on a walk and take it home and say to your child, you know what? I saw this and made me think of you today. Yeah. I just want you to know I love you so very much. And a 5-year-old kid goes, wow, Dad gave me a rock. Mm-hmm. The gift has value and it communicates something important. Physical touch, okay? Touch on the arm, holding hands with a partner, a romantic, crossing your legs while you're watching movies at night on Netflix or whatever it might be. Yeah. Hugs, kisses, obviously sexual intimacy in a marriage relationship, those things, deep communication of love.
Yep.
Quality time. Number 4, quality time, spending time with somebody. I'm giving you the gift of my time and my attention in that. It's not just necessarily sitting in the same room together, but actually interacting. And then acts of service is the last one. Acts of service is anything I do for you, taking out the trash and, doing the laundry. Let me tell you, that communicates a lot to my wife. Mm-hmm. Just doing, hey, I thought of you today and I did this because I knew it would lighten your load. Right. So here's the point. Most of us have a predominant language that we go to. And then we all need all 5. I think that gets missed. Mm-hmm. Gary's really quick to say we all need all 5 languages. And by the way, children under the age of 5 need all 5 all the time.
Yeah.
Don't try to figure out their one love language and only stick that. No, babies need physical touch like crazy. That's connecting neural pathways in the brain. We know a lot of that's related. But as we grow and as we begin to mature, we tend to drift towards a language that we use more often than not. How do you know what a child's love language is? Watch what they do. Does a child draw pictures and walk up and say, here, Mommy, I wanted to do this for you today?
Yeah.
They just gave a gift.
Yep.
Right? And you just watch that. He's got a tool, a digital tool you can use at 5lovelanguages.com, and you can take that inventory. Your spouse can take it. Your kids can take it. You can formalize it that way. But in the book, Building Love Together, we actually have the inventory in the book, and you can have your kids take it for dad, mom, stepdad, and stepmom. We have a version that allows for multiple people.
And also one for teens as well, which is a slight nuance there because it's a little bit different. Yes.
Exactly. And so once you kind of find what somebody's love language is, then you know when you want to make it count. I'm always going to be doing physical touch. I'm always going to be giving gifts. But my wife's primary love language is quality time.
Yeah.
So when we are together, eyeball to eyeball, engaged in conversation, and I'm listening and tuning in, and I'm sharing out of my heart. I mean, that quality time, sometimes it's not communicating like that. Sometimes it's going on a walk and then going on a hike and climbing Pinnacle Mountain, which is just down the road from our house. and just being together, that makes it is the world for her.
And it
And
fills her love tank, and she
it does.
feels appreciated and loved and valued by you, and that changes everything. But
Yeah.
then, if we're talking about a blended family, you're talking about, I don't know, a 14-year-old who has their earbuds in and doesn't want anything to do with you, step parent. What do you do
Yes.
then?
Right. So the whole premise, when I went to Gary and I said, you need to write another book, and I want to do it with you. And here's why. Because just because I know a love language, if I'm a step parent or a step sibling,
Yeah.
just because I know my stepchild's love language, doesn't mean they actually want me to love them that way.
Right.
I mean, that's huge, right? Here's the illustration. Mary, you don't know this, but somebody new just moved in 2 doors down from you. And I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to go make a new friend today. So what are you going to do? Well, let's talk about what you're not going to do. You're not going to go to your neighbor's front door and knock on it. And when they say, who is it? You say, hey, I'm Mary. I'm your new BFF. And when they open the door, you're not going to push your way into their living room, start giving them a bear hug, giving them noogies on the top of their head, kissing them on the cheek, and saying, I am so glad we're best friends. This is marvelous. At that point, they're calling the cops because you have not earned the right. It's so obvious when you say it like that. Step-parents need to have the same attitude. Like, you have to meet this person where they are. I don't care if they're 5 years of age or 15 or 30 years of age. This is also true for adult stepchildren. You knock on the door, and sometimes they don't open the door. Right? So now what do? You talk through the door. You have to meet them where they are. When they crack the door open, you got one eyeball you can see, and you start talking to that eyeball, and you find something that you have in common with your new neighbor. And ultimately you give them a reason to open the door a little wider. You get the analogy. Pretty soon they invite you in the front door. Sometimes they invite you into the kitchen to have a cup of coffee, and now you're making a real friendship. Then when you repeat that 100 times, now you really are really good friends, and there's a love that has matured. So you start with what they give you, not necessarily what is their target love language, and you work your way toward the target.
And that makes a lot of sense to me when you put it that way, because I think, and I can imagine, that if I was a step parent and I was trying to make a perfect, loving home, and I was going in with that agenda of like, well, I'm a great mom. I look at my kids love me. Like, you're going in with the I mentality rather than the you mentality of like, and I love that. I mean, I really think that there is some truth in that. And it takes time, I imagine, to break down those walls, to also overcome maybe a bit of the grief in the loss from that divorce or death of a parent or whatever that's happened before it. What role do you think grief plays in all of this?
Yeah, and that's one of the big factors, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it is important that we understand. Let me say it this way. Sadness and loss brings about the fear of more loss. And the fear of more loss from children tends to bring about cautiousness about new relationships, a guardedness.
Right.
Sometimes opposition, like I don't receive your authority in my life. That classic, you're not my mom, I don't have to do what you say thing is a child who's telling you about their sadness. Now, follow me, because you don't catch that on the surface. You just see a child with a bad attitude. Yes, that's true. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to clean the room because you've asked them to. But what they're also saying is, I'm sad that my mom is not here instead of you.
Right.
So there's sadness underneath the opposition. And so sadness is ever present in this ocean called the blended family. It is always just below the surface. You don't see it unless you're looking for it. It is an undercurrent that is, catching people. You're wanting to swim together as a family, but the undercurrents grab somebody and pulls them off to the side. It's Mother's Day, and my mom is not here. I want to be with my mom, but I'm here with my stepmom. What do I do with that?
Right.
And my stepmom is wonderful, and yet she's not my mom.
Yeah.
And so I like her, I love her, but she's not my mom. What do I do with that? That churns up in a child sadness for what she doesn't have, at the same time she's feeling happiness over what she does have, they always come together. Bitter and sweet tend to walk together in a child's heart in a blended family. So, what's the prescription? Well, what if stepmom can understand that and have empathy for it,
Yeah.
and then step into the sadness? What she's doing is a number of things. If she says to a child, I know Mother's Day is coming up tomorrow and you're with us, and if I were you, I'd rather be at Mom's house. Sorry it didn't work out this year. I'd love to make sure you get in touch with your mom. Let's make sure we FaceTime her tomorrow.
Yeah.
Let's schedule that. Can I help with that? Did you get a card? Do you want to send flowers? You're like, what can I do? I get it. You miss your mom. That's the message. She gives permission to the sadness. She helps the child grieve. And here's the biggest thing. What she is saying to the child is, your relationship with your mother is good and right, and I will support that. And I am not in competition with your relationship with your mother.
Right. And what I hear there is you're slowly building trust and being a safe space for this child. And side note, I can imagine how this scenario could play out if it's an 8-year-old child or a 38-year-old child, an adult child that is missing their mother in the relationship or in the home, environment as well.
Yeah.
That it's still the same premise
It
and
is.
grief and sadness sitting underneath it. One person maybe just has a few extra years of emotional intelligence underneath them than the other, or maybe not, right? As the case may be.
And that's a very good point. We always tell people adult children have the same emotional adjustment issues as do younger age children.
Right.
So you may be watching this and you're working from home and you're an entrepreneur, and at the age of 65, you're getting married again, and you never anticipated that your 25 or 30-year-old children would have any qualms with this. You live on your own. They got their own families, their own lives, their own careers. They're chasing life. And now all of a sudden they're deeply wounded or upset that you're dating again, or that you're choosing to get married. Like, where does that come from? Well, this is what it is. I know it's not fair, but we all walk through life with this assumption that my life can change, but my parents' lives should not change. They should be the rock in my world that is consistent and gives me stability. I make decisions, I move, I grow. That's what children do. We grow up. Our parents are supposed to stay the same. And whenever there's transition within my parents, now that forces an identity shift on me. Now there's new people showing up at Thanksgiving and Christmas and Dad's birthday. And like all of a sudden I don't know who these people are. I don't feel like I'm at home anymore. It doesn't matter if you're 35 or you're 15 or 5. Those are all common experiences. So hear it again through the eyes of a child. You had loss in the past that brought about this change or this life circumstance. Now I got another loss on top of that because I'm losing mom to the guy she's dating.
Yeah.
At least it feels like it. Not really, but it sure feels like it.
Yep.
And I've lost time with her, and my kids have lost time with grandmother, and a lot of things are shifting again in my world. Again, I'm out of control. Again, and those are not feelings people want. Like, we don't like those experiences. And so that raises up in us that guardedness, that caution, that distrust, that opposition to just welcoming new people into our world. Now, let me just, a caution here is sometimes, even as I'm saying these things, I recognize it could be overstating it sometimes. There are some children that are wide open to new people in their life, who are deeply trusting.
Yep.
Even within the same sibling group, you can have one that is and one that isn't. Like, that's part of the confusion. And so the overarching principle in all of this, as a outsider step-parent or step-sibling, is pace with the people you're trying to love. Knock on that door. If they open it, walk in. If they welcome you in and offer you coffee, go sit down and drink. Pace with what their level of openness to you. If, on the other hand, you knock on the door and they say, "Who is it?" "Sorry, we're not opening up." Well, okay, so now I've got to slow down and back up and regroup and figure out how long can I stand on this porch and just continue to talk through the door. That's a hard thing.
Yeah.
But that's what you need to do so that they eventually get to a place where they trust you enough to crack the door open. that's progress.
And this is part of the 5 Ps, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. We've kind of slipped into the 5 Ps.
Yeah, let's go through those. You have 5 Ps of step parenting. So pace. What
Yeah, and
else?
let me back up a step. First one is partner.
Okay.
And partner with your spouse. We talked about this indirectly at the beginning of the conversation. This is make sure your spouse, the biological parent, is really on your side, that you guys are together. Spend a lot of time talking behind the scenes. How are we going to handle Johnny? He's not getting out of bed in the morning and we're all late because of it.
Right.
Let's come together around how we deal with Johnny. When step parents kind of go off on their own, start making rules or barking orders or speaking out of turn, you can lose favor with your partner really fast, right?
Yeah.
That hurts you big time. So be cautious, be careful, make sure your togetherness is strong, lead from a position of unity. All right, now we can continue forward. So partner is number one. The second one is pursue. Pursue is, hey, you got to go knock on the door. If you don't go knock on the door, you're never going to make a relationship with your new neighbor, right? You do have to pursue the child. And be strategic in how you do that. Find what they like, find common ground, grow with that. If you find out your neighbor loves, a certain sports team, start talking that sport and that team and find a way to connect around something they're interested in.
Yeah.
That's how you build a friendship, right? So that makes sense. And then gradually grow it over time. That's pursue. But you have to do it at a pace that matches what their level of openness to you. So you can talk about that sports team all day long. It's only when they open the door that you get to talk about it face to face. And so you have to gauge where they're at, try to meet them where they're at, and move forward a little bit at a time, which brings us to the next P, and that's patience. How long can I stand on this front porch? As long as it takes, I hope. And some people are some kids are really slow to open the door to a step parent, for example.
Yeah.
Some step siblings, just like, hey, I'm 25. I got my own life. I don't really need you in my life. It is what it is. You take what you can get and you just try to build off of that. I think patience is, sometimes we throw that around like that's nothing. No, it can take years for you to feel like they finally opened the door. That's a long, hard haul right there. That is difficult. And I think step parents ought to get a medal sometimes, like a gold medal for patience and just persistence in the middle of that environment. And yet that's what you have to do. The next P is persistence. I said it, and then I was like, did I give that out already? Yeah, persistence. and that's just flat out determined that you're not going to go away.
Right.
The door's still shut, fine, I'm going back to my house and I'm never coming back.
Yeah.
Well, then you're not going to have a relationship. It's not going to get any better. I think one of the beautiful things that happens in blended families a lot is when a step parent takes the lead by loving first. When you sit back and you go, man, I am doing all kinds of stuff for you. I just did, words of affirmation and gifts, and I took you to school and spent some quality time, and this is what I get, fine, whatever. Okay, so you're loving with conditions. No, lead with love and stay persistent at it. I think more often than not, now no guarantees, Mary. I'm not promising people this works with all kids in all circumstances. But more often than not, it will help that child open that door, and you'll begin to grow the relationship over time. By the way, one more bonus P I'll throw in there: prayer. Seriously, just whatever your faith response is there, inviting the God above to kind of be with you and offer wisdom. And when you don't know whether to turn right or left, you need a little wisdom in all of these things.
I think we all do, knowing that there is a higher power and that all of that is not sitting on your shoulders to figure out. I think there is release there, no matter what your religious or spiritual beliefs are, is remembering it's not all on your shoulders. There is something higher going on there.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about, and it makes me also a bit sad when I think about all of this, because I know that there are people in my friendship circles who have step parents and don't call them step parents. They call them by their first name. They never have acknowledged the idea that they were parents at all in any shape or form. And I just can imagine for that step parent, the years and decades of just being shut down like that must be really hard.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't want to make it sound, most kids are not like that. That is not the case for most kids. Every once in a while, that is the story. More often than not, the typical story, what we tell people on average, the average step family needs about 5 to 7 years to really find their sense of familyness, their togetherness, right? And it comes together like this. It's growing together slowly over time. In one of my other books, The Smart Step Family, I talk about how you cook a step family with a crock pot. Not an Instapot, not a microwave. Those are all quick and fast and use a lot of heat. Yeah. It's low heat, it's careful, it's strategic, it's persistent love, but it's not demanding love. You remain in that presence for an extended period of time like crockpots do, and eventually what happens to the ingredients? It's kind of magic. They warm up, and then they soften, and then they start sharing of themselves with the other ingredients. They merge. That's what happens in a healthy step family. It takes time. And so that mentality is very important with each individual child and as your family as an entire unit. You cook it with a crock pot. Every once in a while there's an ingredient that really just hops out of the pot every now and then and it really doesn't want to be there, and that makes it really difficult with that ingredient. But you can have tremendous relationship growth with the other ingredients. So it's kind of count your blessings sometimes and hold on to that, but remaining persistent in the pot. Yeah. One of the biggest challenges, and I'll just kind of leave it with this, on day one in the crock pot, adults, parent, step parent, are highly motivated to get everybody to merge. Like, that's why we got into this. We love each other as husband and wife. We want the family to feel like family. We want our kids to feel safe and secure. And so they have this need that all the other ingredients will merge. And that is dangerous, because when the adults start getting angry because you're not merging the way I need you to on my timetable, now I'm putting pressure on you. And let me tell you what the ingredients typically do. They typically pull back and harden. Right. And now nobody's softening. Now things are not getting better. Things are getting worse. Right. Adults got to relax a little bit. You've got to trust that the crock pot will do its work. If you get overly anxious and try to force it, it often works against you. But if you relax into the journey, you pursue, you pace, you be very patient and persistent, all of a sudden you look up one day and you go, hey, things are coming together. Right. I just had a moment where this child just asked me for help with something. Yeah, they're letting me in. Right. That's exactly right.
I kind of look to the analogy of, an onion has many, many layers, and they're very hard on the outside. But if you can slowly work over time with consistent words and actions that line up together, you're slowly peeling that onion to get to the center where that true love, attention, affection, and vulnerability actually sits. That's where the magic is, I find, as well. That's where trust is built, is slowly doing that. And I think, again, that's where the genius of this book and bringing together the 5 love languages as the framework to do this kind of work is so brilliant in, like you say, like loving first, like putting their love language at the forefront rather than pushing your agenda out first and you hitting some sort of title of achievement or what have you. So what kind of advice would you then give to people who are listening to this episode and, maybe they're on the verge of a separation themselves and becoming co-parents? Because the part that I thought was fascinating in the book that I just hadn't even considered is what you touched on a little bit earlier, is that if you become co-parents and then one or the other or both start to have relationships which develop into marriages, there are this whole unified team of people who love these children as well. What advice would you give to parents wanting to become co-parents?
Okay, so let me clarify your question, because different people in different parts of the world use the word co-parent in a different way. I'm assuming you're asking, what if somebody's married or together and they're thinking about dividing, splitting, and moving into two different households, and then trying to raise the kids from different households?
Yep.
First of all, I would say, especially if this is a blended family marriage and you're thinking about dividing, so this might be division number 2 for the children. Every major transition in a family, a death or a divorce, a remarriage is another major transition, another death or divorce, all of those create difficulty and stress and tragedy in a child's life. It's traumatic.
Yeah.
And so, and in your life, let me just say, the ripples continue forward. Whenever it is at all possible to reconcile, that is absolutely what is best for you, what is best for your kids. Reconciliation shows them that there is reason to believe in relationships. Now, I want to be careful. I'm not talking about extreme circumstances. If somebody's physical abuse or there's some sort of manipulation or something extreme going on, yes, seek safety.
Yes.
Nobody wants you going back to that.
Right.
You can seek safety and then evaluate whether or not there's any way to change that. But separate apart from those extreme circumstances, I think far too many people give up too fast, too soon. There is something to preserve. There is a reward at the end of this journey. I often say to couples, hey, there is a honeymoon for remarried couples. It just comes at the end of the journey, not at the beginning. But if you give up, you never get to the rewards, and your children don't experience the rewards. By the way, do you know there's research? One of the things we're worried about these days is kids giving up on the whole thing of relationships, giving up on marriage and the idea of marriage, don't believe in the institution anymore. Well, you know what? Want to know why? Because they've seen for 40, 50, 60 years now a bunch of broken relationships that don't ever last. Why would I believe that could happen to me?
Right.
We know from research that children who grow up in a stable, healthy step family, get this, they've already watched mom and dad divorce, now they're in a step family situation, and they see this marriage last, loving, have value, hold promise for both the people and the household within it. Those children have more positive attitudes about marriage. They tend to pick better partners as adults and have more lasting, stable marriages themselves. That is huge in the life of a child. In other words, it is worth you figuring out how to preserve and make this marriage last. Go get counseling if you need it. Go find a pastor. More than read a book. Sometimes reading a book will help give you a little bit of direction, but you need that individual intervention from somebody who knows what they're doing. That is worth your time and energy and money because it has lasting value for everybody in your house.
And it requires both parties to do the work. It can't just be one person pulling somebody along emotionally and they're hesitant or emotionally vacant. It has to be both parties doing the work.
That's true, but let me just also add this. You can create change in and of yourself. No, you can't make the other person change, but you can make it more difficult for them to stay that way.
Right.
Leading with love softens somebody's heart. We see it all the time. Leading with love towards a stepchild will eventually, more often than not, soften their heart. Leading with love and strategic love, even in a marriage relationship, can have the impact of helping to invite the other person to join you in this change journey. So even if it's you going as an individual for counseling, it is worth the investment.
And you know what I thought was just so interesting in the book, where it mentioned, you know, if you are in a committed relationship, you've already gone through a divorce and you're with somebody new and that you love and adore, it's better to get married than to just date indefinitely. That I thought, well, gosh, that's interesting. Why is that? And you were mentioning that it's because then the kids, exactly as you say, will see an actual role model of what marriage can and could be, but I think that's interesting because I imagine people who have gone through a divorce go, oh, that was horrible and painful, and I'm never doing that again. So could you speak a little into that?
Yeah, listen to the commentary. I'm never going to do that again. What you're saying to your children and this partner is, I'm never going to put myself in a position where I lose.
Yeah.
And I get it. Fear is huge. Another research project that I was involved in and a book that we wrote, fear predicted whether you had a healthy relationship with 93% accuracy. If you were constantly worried about this relationship coming apart, it trickles negativity down on the relationship. So it makes sense that people would say, let's just live together and not ever really try to fully add permanence. But all you do in that situation is leave yourself constantly leaning out. Until you're in, you're not in. And you're worried about the other person not being in. Well, you're not in either.
Right.
And listen, people kind of intuitively know this. I mean, the research about cohabitation is really clear. It is not the same as marriage. It is not even close. And we intuitively know this, and I can prove it to you. You know, if you had a friend who said, hey, we moved in last week. So when's the shower? When's your mother coming to, throw the big party for you guys? When are you buying a dress?
Yeah.
Nobody buys a dress when they live together. Nobody has a shower when you get cohabited.
Yeah.
We only do that when you get married.
Right.
Everybody knows marriage is different. Even a couple that's been cohabiting for a couple of years, when they get married, we throw them a party. Why? Nothing's physically changed in their world. They're still living together. They're still having sex. Nothing has physically changed, but the world celebrates marriage. Why? Because we know permanence makes a statement that cannot be equaled with cohabitation. So here's the point. This is not a religious point. This is a practical point. That if you want people to merge as if their life and their family depended on it, it needs to be in a climate that says, this is a crock pot and there's a lid on this pot. You can't just climb out and run anytime you want. No, we are committed, and commitment changes the climate and it invites people to merge. So if that's your goal, you need to be working towards commitment.
And you need to be all in.
Need to be all in, not just partial commitment. Yeah.
So again, the book is called Building Love Together in Blended Families, the 5 Love Languages and Becoming Step Family Smart. It's available in bookstores everywhere, wherever you get your books. I definitely recommend catching a copy of it and reading it yourself if you are also, navigating the waters of being in a step family or even thinking about going down that path. There are so many great principles in it. And what I love, Ron, was after every chapter, you have a little bit of a prompt that helped, to journal things out or just to put some of the theory into action and start testing it out in your own lives as well. So thank you so much for that. If you want to get more information about Ron and this book, you can check out his website at rondeal.org, or just simply click on the show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com, and I've got all the links there where you can find Ron and Dr. Chapman and all the good things there. So, Ron, I have a few questions for you as we wrap up. And again, this is not an easy topic, is it? But I really do appreciate you helping to kind of peel the curtain back and show a little bit behind the surface of what's actually going on down there. So, Ron, tell us, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
There's a leadership book that I love by Edwin Friedman called A Failure of Nerve. A Failure of Nerve, and the subtitle is Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. It is unlike any leadership book you've ever read because most of those are about technique. You need to do this, not do that. This is what good leaders do. This book is about you as a person and developing the you as a leader that will allow you to then implement techniques. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of technique goes right out the window. At the end of the day, if you're not able to be strong as a leader, if you're not able to deal with the criticism that comes as a leader, if you live in the fear, if you don't have nerve, as he says, if you don't have the nerve to lead, it doesn't matter which techniques and what school you graduated from. You won't ever do the things that have to be done to lead an organization, whether it's just you or a small group of people or a giant corporation. This is also true of government officials and parents. You see, that's the beautiful thing about this book. Everything he talks about applies, and he applies it to parenting leadership, to business leadership, to political governmental leadership. Great book.
Yeah. Well,
It's not an easy read, by the way. It's a little challenging to get through, but if you absorb it, it'll change your life.
oh, it's so fascinating. I love hearing about new books. I've never heard of this book yet, and so I will definitely give it a peek. We'll put the link in the show notes for people if you want to check it out as well. So tell us, who's one person in your network that you just feel is up to brilliant things right now? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast as well.
I've got a friend, Dr. Julie Slattery. She's been on my podcast recently. We talked. She specializes in sexuality, and her educational group is called AuthenticIntimacy.com. She specializes in helping people think about relationships, but especially women and sexuality and what it's designed for, what it's meant for, and then how do you pursue that with interest and passion. Julie has been on my podcast called Family Life Blended, for those that are really interested in that. Just recently, we spoke on a marriage cruise together and did a whole session on sex. And let me tell you, she is a high thinker, very great clarity, an incredible communicator, and really will get to the heart of the matter. She kind of cuts through all the fluff and the craziness that our world presents to us about sex and gets down to what really matters. Her podcast is called Java with Julie. Really, I recommend that as well.
Oh, I love it. I always love new podcast recommendations. And of course, again, if you want to hear Ron on his podcast as well, you can find that as well. It's Family Life Blended with Ron Deal. Just search wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what's one thing you're grateful for these days?
My wife of 34 years, 3 great kids.
Yeah.
One of them we lost when he was 12. Oh. And it's the great sadness of my life. And maybe someday we could do a podcast talk about sadness.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that we had him for 12 years. The impact that he and his brothers had on one another and the other 2 and where they are now in life. Those are the things that last. If there's anything eternal in this life, it's people and relationships and stuff that extends beyond the stuff of life, the materialism of life. So I'm really grateful for that. I've got a great job. I work with good people, and I get to bless other people in their family relationships. So what matters to me is helping other people with things that I think are eternal for them. So that's good.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And just a reminder to you guys, Ron is a public speaker. He's got a slew of different conferences and events that are coming up in the spring and summer this year that he will be speaking at. Again, you can find all of those links in the show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So Ron, my last question for you today is this. And again, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. Someone somewhere is listening to this episode right now, and she is in the thick of it. Everything that you described in the first 10 minutes of the podcast, she's thinking, get out of my head. You've now just completely described my household life. And quite frankly, it feels like a mess sometimes. Yeah. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
Well, first of all, I would say, because of the belief that I have that there is a God who created all of us and loves us, that you matter. So you feel lonely and disconnected and unsure and confused, and you don't think you matter or that you're important to the people you want to be important to. Well, you do matter. You matter because you have intrinsic worth and value. God cares for you. And I think, you can step into that and lean on that a little bit and say, so what do I do now? And whisper that little prayer. I think that taps you into something important. And then I would say practically, surround yourself with somebody who can help offer a little guidance in this difficult time. So that's a trusted friend, but sometimes you got to go beyond a friend because they won't always tell you the truth. Yeah. But find a mentor, a grandma, a pastor. Sometimes it's a therapist. But somebody who can really speak in from the outside and help you move beyond where you feel stuck right now.
And remember, you're not alone, and you don't have to carry this all by yourself.
That's right. Carrying loads all by ourselves just adds to the weight of the burden, right? It's heavier and heavier. Share it with somebody.
Yeah.
And somebody who doesn't have to carry it the same way that you do, That's
Yeah.
that outsider who can offer support.
Yeah. Ron, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.